I decided to surprise my mom with a visit, my 11-year-old son excited in the seat beside me. But when I saw my husband's truck parked at her gate, a truck that was supposed to be an hour away at his office, I knew something was wrong. I crept silently to her kitchen window, my heart pounding, just to listen. And what I heard them say inside didn't just break my heart, it shattered my entire world. Before we listen in at that window, I have a quick question for you. Who is the one person in this world you trust the most? Let me know in the comments. It's a powerful thing to think about. Okay, let's go back to that quiet suburban street. The idea had been my son's. "Can we go see Grandma?" Leo had asked as I picked him up from school, his face alight with the pure, uncomplicated love a boy has for his grandmother. "Of course, sweetie," I had said, my heart swelling. "Let's go surprise her. We'll pick up some ingredients and bake her favorite cookies." The drive to my mother's house was a picture of perfect, happy suburban life. The sun was warm on our faces through the windshield. We sang along badly to the pop songs on the radio, our voices a cheerful, off-key duet. I felt a profound sense of contentment. I had a wonderful son, a loving husband, and a mother who was not just a parent, but my best friend. I called her every day. I told her everything. She was the one I turned to for advice on everything from parenting to my marriage with Tom. Her wisdom and her unwavering support were the bedrock of my life. I turned onto her familiar tree-lined street, a wave of nostalgia washing over me. I had grown up in this neighborhood. Every crack in the sidewalk, every majestic old oak tree was a part of my own history. I saw her house at the end of the cul-de-sac, the cheerful yellow door, the perfectly manicured garden she was so proud of. And then I saw it. Parked directly in front of her gate was a vehicle that was as familiar to me as my own reflection, my husband's dark blue Ford F-150. I slowed the car to a crawl, my mind struggling to process the image. It didn't make sense. Tom was at work. His office was a 50-mile drive in the opposite direction. He was a project manager on a major construction site. Leaving in the middle of the afternoon on a Tuesday was unheard of. "Hey, Mommy, Daddy's truck is here," Leo chirped from the back seat. "Is he surprising Grandma too?" I guess so, sweetie," I said, but my voice sounded strange to my own ears. A cold, heavy feeling, a primal sense of wrongness began to spread through my chest. Why hadn't he mentioned it? He had called me on his lunch break just 2 hours earlier and had said nothing about leaving work, nothing about visiting my mom. My mind raced, desperately trying to construct a logical, innocent explanation. Maybe his truck broke down and he had to get it towed here? No, it's parked perfectly. Maybe he had a meeting nearby and just stopped in for a quick coffee. Maybe he came to fix that leaky faucet she was complaining about last week. Yes, that was it. That had to be it. He was just being a good, helpful son-in-law. But I couldn't shake the feeling. The cold, ugly knot of dread in my stomach. It was the same feeling I had gotten as a child just before a big thunderstorm. The feeling of the air changing, of pressure dropping. I pulled my car over to the curb a few houses down, out of sight. "What are we doing, Mom?" Leo asked, confused. "Just a second, honey. Mommy just needs to check something. You stay right here and be very, very quiet for me. Can you do that?" He nodded, his eyes wide. He could feel my fear. I got out of the car, my legs feeling unsteady. Instead of walking up the neat, paved driveway, my feet, as if with a will of their own, carried me onto the soft, perfectly manicured lawn of the house next door. I moved slowly, keeping low, using a large hedge of azaleas as cover. I felt like a criminal, a spy, a trespasser, in a life that had, just 5 minutes ago, been so simple and so safe. My heart was pounding in my ears, a frantic, panicked rhythm. "You're being crazy, Emily," a rational part of my brain screamed. "Just walk up to the front door and knock. You're going to feel so foolish when you find out he's just fixing a faucet." But the other part of me, The older, deeper, more instinctual part pushed me forward. I crept along the side of my mother's house, my back pressed against the familiar warm siding. I was moving towards the kitchen window, a large window that looked out onto the side yard, a window my mother always kept cracked open in the afternoon to let in the breeze. As I got closer, I could hear them, their voices, and the sound stopped me dead in my tracks. It wasn't the sound of a polite, formal conversation between a mother and son-in-law. It wasn't the sound of two people discussing a plumbing issue. It was the sound of an easy, familiar, and intimate laughter. The sound of two people who were completely, utterly comfortable with each other. The sound of two people who had no secrets. I took a final, deep, silent breath, my body trembling with a terrible, premonitory grief. I leaned in closer, my ear just inches from the open window, still praying, with every fiber of my being, that I was wrong. I had no idea that the next 10 seconds were about to burn the rest of my life to the ground. I knelt there on the soft, damp grass, hidden by the fragrant leaves of my mother's prize-winning hydrangeas. The sound of their voices from the open kitchen window was a low, intimate murmur, a sound so completely at odds with my own frantic, screaming heartbeat. Every rational part of my brain was telling me to stand up, to walk away, to get back in the car with my son, and drive away from this moment, preserving the beautiful, fragile illusion of my life. But my body was frozen, rooted to the spot by a dread so profound, it felt like a physical paralysis. I had to know. I had to be sure. The first snippets of their conversation were almost mundane, which made them all the more terrifying. It was the casual, easy intimacy of it that first struck me. This was not the polite, slightly formal tone of a mother and her son-in-law. This was the shorthand of two people who shared a world. And then Sterling had the audacity to question my timeline in front of the entire team. I heard my husband Tom say, his voice a low, frustrated rumble. "Oh, I know, honey," my mother Diane replied, her voice a soothing, familiar coo. "He's always been a fool with no vision. You can't let him get to you. You're the real talent in that office, and everyone knows it." Honey. The word, a simple term of endearment, landed on me like a physical blow. She had never called him that in front of me. It was their name, from their world, the one I was not a part of. I felt a wave of nausea so intense, I had to press my mouth against my hand. Then the conversation turned, and the knife that was already in my back began to twist. "Is Emily still planning that girls' weekend trip to the wine country next month?" my mother asked, her voice light and casual. "Yeah," Tom replied with a short, humorless laugh. "Thank God, it's perfect. That gives us 2 full nights. We can finally go to that little inn by the lake you wanted to try. The one with the fireplaces in the rooms." "Oh, that does sound romantic," my mother said. "She's so trusting, you know. It's almost sad. She called me yesterday, you know, going on and on about how lucky she is to have you, how you're the most loyal, honest man in the world." The sound that came from my husband then was not a word. It was a low, contented chuckle, the sound of a man being praised for a virtue he did not possess. "I know," he said, his voice thick with a smug satisfaction. "And she trusts you more than anyone on this planet. That's what makes this so perfect. She'd never, ever suspect. What she doesn't know can't hurt her." The world went silent. The sound of the distant lawnmower, the chirping of birds, the rustle of the leaves, it all just vanished. The only thing I could hear was a high-pitched, screaming whine in my own ears. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. It was a nightmare. I was about to wake up. But the nightmare continued. "We have to be more careful, Tom," I heard my mother say, her voice now a conspiratorial whisper. "Your truck, leaving it out front like this is just sloppy. Someone could see it." "Don't worry," he said, his voice now closer to the window. "I have the perfect excuse if she asks. A surprise plumbing job for my favorite mother-in-law.
Besides, he paused, and my entire body went rigid. It's worth the risk. I love you, Di. I love you too. The last two words were the ones that finally, completely shattered me. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a physical betrayal. It was love. A long-running, secret, and deeply embedded love between the two most important people in my entire world, my husband and my mother. My mind, in an act of pure, agonizing self-defense, began to unravel. It was a frantic, horrifying cascade of recontextualized memories. Every moment of their supposed friendship, every shared joke, every supportive gesture was now recast in this new, sick light. My mother's advice on my wedding day as she was zipping up my dress. He's a good man, Emily, but all men have their secrets. The key to a happy marriage is knowing which ones to look for and which ones to ignore. At the time, I had thought it was just a piece of wise, if cynical, advice. Now I'd realized it had been a confession. The times Tom had been away on business trips that just happened to coincide with my mother visiting her old college friend in the same city. The way they would always take the same side in a family argument. The way he would laugh at her jokes a little too loudly. The way her hand would linger on his arm a little too long. All the tiny details I had seen, but I had refused to process. The thousand small cuts I had dismissed as nothing, now formed a single, gaping, mortal wound. I had not just been a wife and a daughter. I had been a cover story, a prop, a convenient, naive fool in the middle of their long and sordid romance. My entire happy life, the reality I had cherished and protected, was a lie, a carefully constructed illusion they had both worked together to maintain. I don't know how long I knelt there, my body numb, my cheek pressed against the cold, rough brick of the house. I finally became aware of a small, insistent tugging on my sleeve. I looked down and saw a small face peering at me through the hydrangea leaves. It was my son, Leo. He had gotten out of the car. His face was a mask of worry. "Mommy, are you crying? What's wrong?" I looked at his beautiful, innocent face, and a new feeling, a feeling more powerful than my own, grief, surged through me. A cold, protective, and absolute fury. They had not just betrayed me. They had betrayed him. I put a finger to my lips, then backed away from the window, pulling him with me. "Shh, sweetie," I whispered, my voice a ragged, broken thing. "It's nothing, just some bad pollen. My allergies are acting up." I forced a smile that felt like it was cracking my face in two. "You know what? I think Grandma is probably taking a nap. We shouldn't bother her. Let's go home." The drive back was a blur. The woman who had left her house an hour ago, full of love and happy plans, was gone forever. In her place was someone else, someone hollowed out, someone who had seen the abyss. But as I clutched the steering wheel, my knuckles white, a new, hard, and dangerous resolve began to form in the ruins of my heart. They thought I was a fool. They thought what I didn't know couldn't hurt me. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. I drove home in a state of surreal, silent autopilot. The world outside my car windows was a meaningless blur of familiar shapes. The cheerful storefronts, the green expanse of the local park, the other mothers in their sensible minivans. It was my world, my life, but it felt like I was watching it through a thick, soundproofed sheet of glass. The only thing that was real was the cold, hollow cavern that had just been carved out in my chest and the small, innocent voice of my son, Leo, from the back seat. "Is Grandma really sick, Mommy?" he asked, his voice small and worried. "Yes, sweetie," I lied. The words felt like broken glass in my mouth. "She just needs to rest. We'll see her another day." When we got home, The first thing I saw was the large framed photograph on our mantelpiece. It was from our wedding day. It was a picture of me, my husband Tom, and my mother, Diane, all three of us beaming. My mother standing between us with her arms wrapped around our shoulders. It had always been my favorite photo, a perfect picture of my two favorite people, my two rocks, my two confidants, united in their love for me. I now saw it for what it really was, a picture of two conspirators flanking their smiling, oblivious fool, a portrait of a lie. With a sudden, violent shudder, I snatched the photo from the mantelpiece, walked it into the kitchen, and buried it face down at the bottom of the recycling bin. It was the first act of my new life. My first priority was my son. I put on the mask of the happy, normal mother. I got him a snack, I asked him about his school day, I put on his favorite cartoon. I built a small, fragile bubble of normalcy around him, a shield to protect him from the toxic fallout of a bomb he didn't even know had just detonated. Once he was safely engrossed in his show, I retreated to my bedroom and locked the door. And there, in the silence of the room I shared with my husband, the full, crushing weight of the betrayal finally hit me. It wasn't a storm of tears. It was a silent internal collapse. I sank to the floor, my back against the bed, and I just broke. Every memory I had of my mother, every loving word, every piece of advice, every shared secret was now tainted, poisoned. She hadn't been my best friend. She had been my keeper, my warden, the one ensuring that my blissful ignorance remained intact. And Tom, my loving, devoted husband, his every kiss, his every I love you, his every shared plan for our future, it was all a lie, a performance. My entire marriage, my entire relationship with my mother had been a grand, elaborate piece of theater, and I was the only person who hadn't been given a script.
The grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. But as the hours passed, as the afternoon sun faded into the gray twilight of evening, the grief began to do something strange. It began to burn. The raw, open wound of my heartbreak began to cauterize, to harden, to transform into something else, something cold, sharp, and terrifyingly clear. Anger. It was an anger so pure, so absolute, it was almost calming. The time for tears was over. The time for being a victim was over. They had treated me like a fool. They had used my love and my trust as a shield for their own sordid affair. They had built their secret happiness on the foundation of my life. And I decided, in the cold, hard silence of that bedroom, that I was going to burn that foundation to the ground. But how? A direct confrontation would be useless. They were master liars. They would deny it, gaslight me, twist my own words until I was the crazy paranoid one. Going to a lawyer, filing for divorce, that would happen, yes, but it felt too quiet, too private. Their betrayal had been a secret, a quiet act of emotional violence that had been happening for years. Their exposure, I decided, had to be the opposite. It had to be loud, it had to be public, it had to be undeniable. And then, the perfect, poetic, and utterly devastating idea came to me. My mother's 60th birthday was in 2 weeks, and I, her loving, devoted daughter, was in charge of planning her grand surprise party. I had been working on it for months. The venue was booked, the caterer was chosen, the invitations had been sent to 50 of her closest friends and our entire extended family. It was meant to be the crowning achievement of her social life, a celebration of the wonderful, beloved woman everyone thought she was. It was the perfect stage. My plan began to form, a cold, meticulous piece of strategic architecture. I needed more than just my own word. I needed proof, irrefutable proof. I needed to catch them in their own words. The next morning, I did something the old Emily would have never dreamed of.
I went online, and using a credit card they didn't know about, I overnighted a piece of equipment I had only ever read about in spy novels. A tiny, high-definition camera disguised as a USB phone charger. When it arrived, I waited for the perfect opportunity. I told Tom I was taking Leo to the library for the afternoon, a normal, boring part of our routine. I knew, with a sick, certain feeling, that the moment I was gone, he would be on the phone with her, arranging a visit. I placed the small black charger in a power outlet in our kitchen, the one with a perfect clear view of the entire room. I made sure the lens was unobstructed, the memory card was empty, and the device was recording. And then I left. I took my son to the library and we read books for 3 hours, my mind a million miles away, a silent digital spider in the center of a newly woven web. When I returned home that evening, the house was empty and quiet, just as I had left it. I waited until Leo was asleep. Then, with a hand that was surprisingly steady, I retrieved the camera from the kitchen wall. I walked to my office, locked the door, and plugged it into my computer. I watched the footage, and there they were. Them, in my kitchen, kissing over the island where I made my son's breakfast. My mother laughing as she ran her fingers through my husband's hair. I watched, my face a mask of stone, as they talked. They talked about their upcoming weekend at the lake house, about the close calls, about the lies they had told. And then I heard it, the final, damning piece I needed.
"Did you talk to her about her inheritance from her grandmother?" my mother asked, her voice casual. "Not yet," Tom replied. "I'm working on it. If I can convince her to invest it in my new business venture, we could have the whole amount free and clear in 6 months, enough to finally leave this place and start over, just us." It wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was a financial conspiracy. They were actively plotting to steal from me. I found the exact clip I needed. The kiss, the conversation about their future, the part about my inheritance. I isolated the 2-minute segment, a perfect, self-contained little movie about their monstrous deception. I saved it to a new encrypted file on my desktop. I named it Mom's Birthday Tribute. The trap was set, the weapon was armed, and the party, the grand celebration of my mother's 60th birthday party, was in just 2 short days. I was going to give her a tribute she and all of her friends would never, ever forget. The 2 days leading up to my mother's 60th birthday party were the longest of my life. I moved through the world in a state of strange, detached calm, a quiet, observant ghost in my own home. I was a master of performance. I played the part of the loving wife, the doting daughter. I discussed the final party arrangements with my mother on the phone, my voice a perfect imitation of cheerful excitement. I consulted with my husband Tom about the speech he was planning to give in her honor, offering suggestions, my face a serene support. They saw nothing, they suspected nothing. They were so secure in their deception, so confident in my naivete, that they moved through their days with a careless, easy intimacy, completely unaware of the digital eye I had hidden in their midst, or the guillotine that was slowly being winched into place above their heads. The night of the party, the grand ballroom of a downtown hotel was a glittering spectacle of my own design. I had spared no expense. Soft uplighting cast a warm golden glow on the dozens of tables, each adorned with a magnificent floral centerpiece. A string quartet played softly in the corner. A champagne fountain bubbled near the entrance. I had planned the perfect celebration, a flawless tribute to the wonderful, beloved woman my mother Diane had always pretended to be. It was a beautiful stage for a beautiful lie, and tonight it would become the stage for an ugly, devastating truth. I stood by the door, greeting guests, my husband at my side. He looked handsome in his dark suit, his hand resting proudly on the small of my back. "You've outdone yourself, Em. Your mom is going to be ecstatic. You're the best daughter in the world." I just smiled up at him, a cold, hollow space where my heart used to be. When my mother arrived, the surprise went off without a hitch. She walked in, and 100 of her closest friends and family yelled in unison. Her reaction was a masterclass in theatrical joy. Her hands flew to her face, her eyes welled with perfect photogenic tears. She hugged me tightly, her cheek pressed against mine. "Oh, Emily, this is the most wonderful thing anyone has ever done for me. You are the best thing in my life." I just hugged her back, my own body rigid,
and thought of the footage on the encrypted flash drive in my purse. The party was a resounding success. People ate, they drank, they laughed. My mother was the queen of the ball, floating from table to table, soaking in the adoration. My husband was the perfect son-in-law, charming her friends, making sure her glass was always full. They were a team, a perfect, polished, and utterly rotten team.
Finally, the time came for the speeches. My aunt went first, telling a series of sweet, sentimental stories from their childhood. A few of my mother's oldest friends went next, sharing memories of their long and cherished friendship. Then, my husband, Tom, walked to the podium. He was brilliant. He spoke of my mother's kindness, her generosity, her unwavering support for him and for me. "Diane is more than a mother-in-law to me," he said, his voice thick with a sincerity that made my stomach turn. "She has been a second mother, a guide, a best friend. Her love for her daughter and for me is a shining example of what family truly means." The room erupted in applause. My mother wept openly, dabbing at her eyes. And then it was my turn. I walked to the podium, the small, heavy flash drive clutched in my hand. A hush fell over the room. I looked out at the sea of expectant faces, at my family in the front row, at my husband, who was looking at me with such pride, and at my mother, whose face was a perfect portrait of tearful maternal love. "Thank you all for being here," I began, my voice clear and steady. "Tonight is all about celebrating my mother. And it's so hard to find the right words to describe a person as complex as she is." I smiled, a small, tight smile. "My mother has taught me so much, more than you could ever know. She's taught me about love, about trust, and about the nature of secrets. So rather than try to use my own clumsy words, I've put together a little video tribute, a collection of moments that I think show the woman she really is." I turned and nodded to the technician at the back of the room. The ballroom lights dimmed. The massive projection screen behind the stage flickered to life. The video started exactly as they would have expected. A sentimental piano melody began to play. A slideshow of old photographs faded in and out. There was my mother as a young woman, beautiful and vibrant. There was me as a baby in her arms. There were happy family Christmases, school graduations, my own wedding day. The room was filled with soft, appreciative ahs. My mother was weeping again, this time into her napkin, completely overcome. The slideshow ended on the picture from my mantelpiece, the one of the three of us at my wedding. The music swelled to a crescendo, and then, abruptly, it cut out. The screen went black. A nervous murmur went through the crowd. Then a new video started. There was no music. The lighting was harsh. The angle was strange. And the audio was raw and unfiltered. It was the footage from my kitchen. The room was plunged into a confused silence. On the screen, my husband, Tom, was leaning against the kitchen island. My mother, Diane, was walking towards him. The audience watched utterly baffled as my mother on the screen wrapped her arms around my husband's neck and kissed him, a long, deep, and passionate kiss. A collective, horrified gasp sucked the air out of the ballroom. Then the voices came, their own voices, clear and damning, echoing through the silent, cavernous room. "Did you talk to her about her inheritance from her grandmother?" my mother's voice on the screen asked, casual and conspiratorial. "Not yet," Tom's voice replied. "I'm working on it. If I can convince her to invest it in my new business venture, we could have the whole amount free and clear in 6 months. Enough to finally leave this place and start over. Just us." I watched my mother in the front row. Her face, which had been wet with happy tears, was now a frozen, ghastly mask of pure, abject terror.
Her teacup, which she had been holding, slipped from her nerveless fingers and shattered on the floor. My husband stood beside her, his body rigid, his face as white as a sheet.
The video ended. The screen went black. The lights in the ballroom slowly came up, revealing a scene of utter, catastrophic social ruin. 100 stunned, horrified faces were staring not at the screen, but directly at my mother and my husband. I was still standing at the podium. I looked out at the sea of shocked faces, my gaze finally resting on the two people who had destroyed my life. I raised the microphone to my lips one last time, my voice the only sound in the dead, silent room. "Happy birthday, Mom." My final words, "Happy birthday, Mom," landed in the dead, suffocating silence of the ballroom like a single soft flake of snow that triggers a catastrophic avalanche. For a long, agonizing moment, no one moved. The entire room, all 100 of my mother's closest friends and our extended family, remained frozen in a tableau of collective, horrified shock. Their eyes darted from the giant, damning image of my mother and my husband, frozen in a kiss on the screen, to the real-life figures at the head table, who looked like statues carved from pure, abject terror. The silence was finally shattered. It wasn't my mother or my husband who spoke. It was my mother's oldest brother, my Uncle Steve. He rose from his chair, his face a mask of such profound, quiet disgust that it was more powerful than any shout. He looked at his sister, then at my husband, and without a single word, he dropped his napkin on the table and walked out of the ballroom. His wife followed him, then another couple, and another. It was a quiet mass exodus, a silent social shunning of a magnitude I had never witnessed. They were fleeing the scene of a crime, leaving the perpetrators to rot in the prison of their own making. My mother, Diane, finally broke. A sound tore from her throat, a high-pitched, wounded wail that was part grief, part rage. "No," she whispered, shaking her head in frantic denial. "No, no, no, no." Tom, my husband, finally snapped out of his paralysis. He lunged towards the stage, his face a mess of panic and fury. "That's not real," he shouted, his voice cracking, pointing a trembling finger at the now dark screen. "It's a fake, a deep fake. Emily, you twisted witch, how could you do this? How could you create such a monstrous lie?" I just looked down at him from the podium, my expression unreadable. I didn't need to say a word. The raw, undeniable truth of the footage was a far more powerful testimony than any I could offer. His desperate, pathetic denial was a confession in itself. I placed the microphone gently back on its stand, picked up my purse, and walked off the stage. I didn't rush. My movements were calm, deliberate. As I walked towards the exit, the remaining guests parted for me as if I were a queen, their faces a mixture of awe, pity, and a strange, fearful respect. I didn't look back at the wreckage of the head table, at the ruins of the two lives I had just so thoroughly and publicly dismantled. I was done. The days that followed were a storm. My phone was a relentless torrent of voicemails and text messages. They were a pathetic, predictable cycle of emotions. First came the rage, the threats of lawsuits for slander, the accusations. Then, when I didn't respond, came the desperate, manipulative pleas. Voicemails from my mother, sobbing, begging me to think of the family. Texts from Tom, 100 of them a day, swinging wildly from "I will destroy you" to "Please, Emily, I love you. We can fix this." I didn't listen to any of them. I was busy. I had hired the best divorce lawyer in the city. When we had our first meeting, I didn't need to tell her a long, sad story. I just played her the 2-minute video. She had watched it in silence, her expression hardening. When it was over, she had looked at me and said, "He won't get a thing."
And she was right.
The divorce was swift and brutal. Tom, faced with the irrefutable, humiliating evidence, had no leverage, no ground to stand on. His attempts to claim half our assets were laughed out of court. I was awarded the house, full custody of our son Leo, and a significant support settlement. He was left with his car, his clothes, and the public shame of his profound betrayal. My mother became a ghost in her own life. Her friends, the ones who had witnessed her grand humiliation, abandoned her. Our family, fractured by the scandal, took sides, and very few chose hers. She was left with nothing but the company of the man for whom she had sacrificed her own daughter. The hardest part, of course, was Leo. I sat him down a week after the party and tried my best to explain the unexplainable. I told him a simple, age-appropriate version of the truth. "Sweetie," I had said, my heart aching for the pain I knew he would feel. "Sometimes grown-ups make very big, very bad mistakes that hurt a lot of people. And when that happens, even people we love, we can't be around them anymore because it's not safe for our hearts." I told him that his father and his grandmother had made one of those mistakes and that they would not be in our lives anymore. I told him it was not his fault, 100 times over, and I told him that I would always, always be there to protect him. It's been a year now. We sold the big suburban house that was haunted by the ghosts of my old life. Leo and I live in a smaller, brighter apartment downtown, a new home for our new, smaller, but infinitely more honest family. The healing has been slow, and it is not always easy, but it is real. I was unpacking an old box of photographs the other day, and I found one of my mother. She was young, maybe 20, long before she had met my father, long before she had met Tom. She was laughing, her face full of a light and a joy I had never seen in her. I felt a flicker of sadness, not for the mother I had lost, but for the woman she could have been, before her life was twisted and corrupted by a long, dark secret. My vindication wasn't the moment of their public exposure at the party. It wasn't winning the divorce or seeing their social lives crumble. My real vindication is this: the quiet peace of my new apartment, the sound of my son's easy, happy laughter from the other room, the profound, unshakable freedom of living in the truth. My life had been a beautiful, elaborate lie. And a lie, no matter how beautiful, is still a cage. I hadn't just destroyed their lives. I had, finally, and for the first time, truly claimed my own. An absolutely devastating story of betrayal and a powerful, perfectly executed revenge. What do you think of Emily's decision to expose them so publicly? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This is a story we'll be talking about for a long time. If you were captivated by this incredible drama, please show your support by hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more powerful daily stories. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.